The scene starts with a woman named Latrice boarding a plane and taking her seat. She meets a man named Jordan, who helps her with storing her luggage. She notices the weather and shares how she hates flying during bad weather. Jordan reassures Latrice that she'll be fine. After the flight attendants go through the usual explanations, the pilot makes an announcement. The plane won't be flying until the weather is clear. This makes Latrice frustrated. She tells Jordan that she can't be late for her sister's wedding on the weekends because she's the maid of honor. Coincidentally, we find out that Jordan is heading to the same place as Latrice to perform a certain ceremony for his loved ones. He once again reassures her that they'll get to their destination on time. When she asks why he's so sure, he talks about how God always has perfect timing. He then proceeds to tell her a story related to perfect timings. The scene shifts to the perspective of the story, and we are introduced to Valerie. She's talking on a call with her friend Lindsay, who set her up on a blind date. Valerie is worried about the date, but Lindsay reassures her that she'll like the guy. True enough, Valerie meets Vaughn and they immediately click. Things progress quickly after the first date, and they end up getting married. The newlywed couple was able to purchase a house, which is a sign that this story happened a long time ago when houses were still affordable. Unfortunately, their marriage isn't all rainbows and sunshine. In a later scene, we find out that Valerie experienced a miscarriage. Lindsay is there consoling her, telling her she'll be okay. Lindsay points out to Valerie that a miscarriage is not her fault, it can happen to anyone. Vaughn also echoes this sentiment. He tells his wife that he's willing to wait, and that God will eventually give them what they need. The scene goes back to Latrice and Jordan. She can't believe that the couple in the story have been married for 5 years and still haven't conceived. The conversation then goes back to the bad weather. Latrice rants again and, just like before, Jordan gives the same response about having faith. The scene shifts back to the story. It's been 10 years since Vaughn and Valerie have been married. The couple is talking about how much they love each other throughout the years. They also talk about their upcoming wedding anniversary and the preparations they need to make. Moments later, 2 neighbor kids arrive at the couple's home. They want to play football with Vaughn. At first, he tells them that he's busy preparing dinner, but Valerie interjects. She tells Vaughn that she'll make dinner by herself, so he's free to hang out with the kids. While watching her husband from the window, Valerie suddenly feels the urge to vomit. She rushes to the bathroom. When Vaughn walks back into the house, Valerie shows him a pregnancy test kit indicating a positive result. The couple hugs each other in celebration. Vaughn's excitement gets the best of him, and he starts talking about how he's going to tell his relatives during the anniversary party. Valerie curbs his enthusiasm. She tells him that they can't reveal her pregnancy to anyone until they've visited the doctor to make sure everything is fine. She makes Vaughn promise not to tell anyone about it until then. Vaughn is confused at first, but he eventually agrees to keep the pregnancy a secret. Fast forward to the anniversary party, Vaughn and Valerie are mingling with their relatives. When Vaughn talks to his father and father-in-law, the first topic that gets brought up is about having grandkids. Likewise, Valerie is having the same discussion with her mother and mother-in-law on the other side of the house. Later, Valerie heads out to talk to Lindsay and her sister-in-law, Charis. We find out that Charis is dating someone, but she's taking things slow, since she only has 1 semester left before finishing graduate school. Later that night, Valerie's father Ephraim delivers a heartfelt speech praising the couple celebrating their anniversary. At the end of the speech, he gives the couple a ticket to an all-expenses-paid cruise to Jamaica. While thanking Ephraim for the gift, Vaughn breaks his promise. He announces that he and Valerie are having a baby. Naturally, everyone cheers and showers the couple with congratulations. Later that night, Valerie gives Vaughn the cold shoulder. When she finally talks to him, she asks why he broke his promise. Vaughn makes excuses, saying that he got overcome by the positive emotions earlier. Valerie admits that she's afraid of having a miscarriage again. Vaughn reassures her that things will be fine, and the couple hugs. The next day at the doctor's office, Valerie's worst fear comes true. The doctor tells the couple that her pregnancy is a false positive, which means that she's not actually pregnant. As expected, the couple is devastated. The doctor's only advice is to try other alternatives, if they are willing to. When the couple returns home, Valerie once again brings up Vaughn's slip-up, stating that she has to deal with the aftermath of the bad news. Even when Vaughn tells her that they'll deal with it together, Valerie doesn't feel reassured. She insists on locking herself in her room alone to process the news. To make the situation worse, Charis suddenly arrives and tells Vaughn that she's pregnant. Vaughn reassures his little sister that things will be fine as he comforts her. Charis turns to Valerie and asks her what she's going to do with the pregnancy. Since the timing of such a question is unfortunate, Valerie doesn't respond. She goes back to her room to sulk and cry. The next scene takes place on a Sunday, 1 week after the incident. Vaughn tries to get Valerie to come with him to church, but she is not interested. She is tired of all the looks of pity and all of the sad messages from people she knows. Vaughn ends up going to church on his own for the first time in 10 years. The next scene takes place inside the church. Vaughn is sitting at the front and listening to the sermon of his father. It's a regular day at a church, nothing special. Later, Charis and Lindsay visit Valerie. Charis apologizes to Valerie for the things she said when she was panicking. Valerie also apologizes for ignoring Charis that night, when she needed her support. Lindsay then points out that both women are going through their own struggles, and that's fine. Lindsay and Charis give Valerie a tight hug to show their support and love. Back at the church, Vaughn is talking to his parents. He wishes that his wife would have been there to hear the sermon. Vaughn's father, Terry, tells him that some things are out of his control, and that's when God comes in. It's not surprising that a pastor would give advice in such a way. They end the conversation in prayer. Meanwhile, at the couple's home, Valerie is desperately praying for God to show her the way. She no longer knows what to do when it comes to their marriage. The scene shifts back to the airplane with Latris and Jordan. Latris shares a few things about herself, particularly her relationship with her sister. She also briefly talks about her late father, the one who encouraged her to pursue her dreams. We find out that Latris and her sister often disagree on many things. However, after many years, the two of them eventually manage to see eye to eye. As expected, Jordan's reply is about God's perfect timing. Going back to Jordan's story, Valerie pulled herself together and resumed attending church sermons. During the sermon, Vaughn's mother Rebecca talks about the power of love and how everyone should be lifting each other up. After the sermon, Rebecca greets Valerie, welcoming her back to church. Valerie gets distracted for a moment after seeing her husband talking to some church kids. She seems to be thinking about the most important thing that she can't give her husband, which is a child. When the couple arrives home, Valerie opens a drawer and sees a photo of Charis's ultrasound. Once again, she is reminded of her problem. When she checks the grocery bags, she finds a lot of junk food. Vaughn reveals that he's planning to play video games with some kids, so he bought some snacks for them. Valerie suddenly gets mad at Vaughn for not telling her about his plans. She points out that he has a habit of not considering her feelings when making decisions. When the kids arrive at their house, Vaughn tries to cancel their plans. Naturally, the kids become upset because Vaughn made a promise that they'll play video games with him if they get good grades. Not wanting to be the villain, Valerie tells the boys to go ahead inside and make themselves at home. However, seconds later Valerie heads out of the house without telling Vaughn where she's going. When Valerie returns to the house, it's already 1 a.m. Vaughn has been waiting for her, so he asks where she's been. Valerie tells him that she needed some space, so she went out to clear her mind. When Vaughn asks what it is that Valerie realized while outside, she gives him a gut-wrenching answer. Valerie wants a divorce. The next day, Valerie starts packing her things. Vaughn sees her and begs her to reconsider her decision. He thinks she's being irrational. He points out that there is no need for such drastic actions, even if they're going through a difficult time in their marriage. Valerie believes that she can no longer make Vaughn happy because she can't give him a child. Vaughn tries to convince her that he loves her whether they have a child or not. Still, his words have no effect on Valerie. She's already made up her mind. Valerie leaves Vaughn without a choice as she walks out of the room, and their marriage. Overcome with sadness, Vaughn cries after his wife leaves. In the next scene, Valerie is at her parents' place preparing to celebrate her dad's birthday. Her mother asks her where Vaughn is, but the doorbell rings before she can answer. Lindsay arrives and asks why Valerie has been ignoring her texts and calls all week. Valerie dismisses the question, saying she'll talk about it later. Moments later, Valerie's father finally goes downstairs, and everyone sits down to eat the feast. The older couple teases each other for a little bit. This goes to show that their relationship is still going strong, even after a long time. As soon as everyone starts putting food on their plate, Lindsay asks where Vaughn is. Valerie gives an honest response, stating that her husband isn't coming. When her father asked why, she admits that she asked Vaughn not to come. Naturally, her answers make everyone more intrigued, so they ask more questions. Valerie tries to change the topic, pointing out that they should eat first. However, his father is too invested in the conversation, so he insists that Valerie tell them what's going on. Valerie finally reveals that she's getting divorced. As expected, everyone at the table is shocked by the news. When Valerie states the reason why she wants to get a divorce, Lindsay and her parents try to convince her to not go through with it. After several back and forths, Valerie doesn't budge. She asks everyone at the table to be supportive of her decision. After that, Valerie walks away from the table, souring the occasion. The next scene takes place at church. Vaughn is sitting with his parents, waiting for Valerie. When she finally arrives, the first thing she says is that any further conversation about her decision is going to be pointless. Valerie repeats the same points she said to Vaughn during the first time they talked about divorce. She believes that separating is the best decision, since she can't give her husband a child. She doesn't want Vaughn to feel trapped in their marriage. Rebecca interjects. She tells Valerie that many women have experienced a long wait before being blessed with a child. She gives the example of Sarah from the Bible, the wife of Abraham. She also mentions that she and Pastor Terry experienced waiting for years before adopting Vaughn. Terry emphasizes that his son loves Valerie the same way he loves his wife. Unfortunately, no matter how many words of wisdom the elderly couple gives Valerie, her mind is made up. In her mind, leaving Vaughn is what is going to lead to his long-term happiness. Before leaving, she tells him that she'll do everything it takes to make Vaughn happy. Unfortunately, staying married to him is not part of that. In the next scene, we see Vaughn playing video games with his sister. All of a sudden, Charis decides it would be a great time to bring up her brother's marriage troubles. She tells him that she believes that he and Valerie will get through tough times. Vaughn is hopeful that things will get better. Later that night, Vaughn visits Valerie to make a request. He agrees to go through the divorce with her, on one condition. He wants her to go on the cruise to Jamaica with him. The tickets are non-refundable and non-transferable, so he believes that it would be a waste not to use it. Of course, we know the real reason he's making this request is that he's hoping that their relationship will get better after the cruise. Valerie tries to argue, but Vaughn insists that it is the last wish he'll make before they completely separate. Valerie agrees, and Vaughn quickly leaves without saying anything else. The scene shifts back to Jordan and Latrice. The airplane still hasn't departed, and Latrice is getting more impatient. Once again, Jordan starts talking about God's timing and plans. He offers a different perspective, pointing out that rain and clouds are God's way of taking care of the earth. Latrice is amused by the way Jordan views the bad weather. After a short while, she asks if Vaughn's plan worked. So Jordan continues telling the story. In the next scene, Vaughn visits his parents at the church. They ask him how the cruise went. Vaughn admits that he and Valerie spent most of their time arguing. In fact, they spent most of the cruise away from each other, rather than together. He informs them that the divorce is happening. Vaughn's parents offer consoling words, telling him that despite being separated, they believe that God has a plan for them. We see a brief scene of Valerie and Vaughn doing their own thing, starting their new lives separately. After that, we see Vaughn going to church, but he decides to go somewhere else once he reaches the front door. In another scene, Valerie and Lindsay are gossiping about Vaughn dating again. We find out that he's seeing the nurse who helped deliver Charis's baby. When Lindsay asks Valerie how she feels about the recent turn of events, she admits that she has come to terms with it. After that, Valerie mentions her plans to get breast implants and waist reduction surgery. In the next scene, we see Vaughn on a date with the nurse, Zoe. They briefly talk about Charis and her baby. After that, she asks him if he has any plans of having children in the future. Zoe has no idea that this is a touchy subject for Vaughn. He plays it cool and admits that he once wanted a child, but now, he's not sure if he still wants one. When Zoe tries to ask him why that's the case, he brushes off the question, stating that it's a long story. The next scene takes place at the office of a plastic surgeon. Lindsay is with Valerie, asking her if she really wants to go through with the body modifications. Valerie is determined to go through with it, so Lindsay acts supportive. Later, Lindsay is surprised to hear that Valerie isn't going to go through with the surgery. This is because Valerie just discovered that she's pregnant. Back at Vaughn's house, we see him having fun while preparing dinner. Seconds later, the doorbell rings and Vaughn welcomes his sister inside. After taking a seat, the first thing that Charis asks is if things are going well between Zoe and her brother. Vaughn admits that despite liking Zoe, he's taking things slow. He doesn't want to rush into a new relationship. Vaughn doesn't say it, but his shaky responses at times indicate there might be a different reason for taking things slowly. It's safe to say that perhaps he hasn't completely moved on from Valerie. After all, he's been married for quite a long time. Charis asks why Vaughn hasn't been coming to church lately. She mentions that a lot of his friends miss him. This is when Vaughn admits that going to church is not the same without his ex-wife. For him, church activities have been a huge part of his married life, so it feels different going to church alone. Charis reassures him that everything will be fine, and reminds Vaughn that it was him who taught her how to be resilient. After that, the siblings give each other a warm hug and continue eating their meal. At Valerie's place, Lindsay hands Valerie some envelopes from her mailbox. She then tells her best friend to go and tell Vaughn about her pregnancy. Naturally, Valerie is conflicted. She knows it would be very embarrassing for her to tell Vaughn that she's pregnant, especially after divorcing him because of her inability to give him a child. She can only imagine what Vaughn's reaction would be to the news. Lindsay insists that Valerie should summon the courage to do what's right, no matter how embarrassing it's going to be. In the next scene, Zoe appears in front of Vaughn's house to surprise him. However, her timing is unfortunate, since he's also heading out at the moment. Coincidentally, Valerie is also there to talk to Vaughn. However, since she's a fair distance away from his home, nobody notices her. She decides to go back inside her car after seeing Vaughn talking to Zoe. She thinks Vaughn and Zoe's relationship is progressing, and that appearing in front of them would only cause drama. Later that night, we see Vaughn arrive at Valerie's front door. We also see Lindsay with him. She admits to revealing where Valerie's house is to Vaughn. After that, she quickly makes her exit to give the ex-lovers some privacy. When Vaughn enters the house, Valerie hands him the divorce decree, because she received both copies of them. Vaughn goes through several emotions at once while holding the paperwork, but manages to pull himself together. According to him, it doesn't matter what the paper says, because he knows that deep inside, he loves Valerie. Vaughn's calm attitude doesn't last long, because he loses his mind once Valerie shows him an ultrasound photo. Vaughn misunderstands what Valerie means and assumes that she got pregnant by a new lover. He becomes emotional, stating that the thing he'd always wanted finally happened, but it's not with him. Before he storms out, Valerie quickly corrects the misunderstanding, telling Vaughn that the baby is his. Naturally, Vaughn doesn't believe her. They haven't seen each other for several months, so it's not possible for the baby to be his. Valerie goes into more detail, declaring that she's been pregnant for 6 months without showing any obvious signs. Vaughn, once again, goes through a series of emotions. He ends up sitting down and needing a glass of water while processing the situation. After some time, Vaughn finally calms down. He hugs Valerie as both of them laugh at how ridiculous the situation is. They can't believe that their wish was granted, only after getting divorced. The scene shifts back to the airplane. Latrice can't believe the story she just heard from Jordan. At this point, even the other passengers and the flight attendants are invested in Jordan's story. They are all waiting for him to tell them what happens next. In the next scene, we see a family gathering at Vaughn and Valerie's home. The relatives are passing the baby around, all of them getting a chance to see the child born of a miracle. We also witness a scene where Vaughn and Valerie marry each other again, on the same day that their child is baptized. When the scene returns to Jordan, everyone around him is clapping. It seems that his storytelling skill is so great that people can't help but applaud. After that, the pilot finally announces that the plane is going to depart. Jordan turns to Latrice and tells her that he was right about God's perfect timing. While Latrice is in a good mood, Jordan takes the opportunity to ask her out for dinner when they arrive at their destination. Looks like God is not the only one that knows about perfect timing. After several hours, Latrice and Jordan arrive at the airport in Atlanta. Latrice sees her sister and her sister's fiancé. Her sister is glad to see her, since she was worried that Latrice couldn't make it in time because of the weather. Latrice also takes the time to introduce Jordan to her sister. Moments later, Jordan's parents arrive to meet him. He introduces Latrice to them. This is when we find out that Jordan's parents are Valerie and Vaughn, and that he's there to officiate their vow renewal. The couple is celebrating 35 years of marriage. Latrice is pleasantly surprised that the people in Jordan's story are actually his parents. The younger couple is amazed after hearing how long Vaughn and Valerie have been married. They take the opportunity to ask for some advice from them. Vaughn gives them what they want. He tells them that they will eventually encounter hard times in their marriage, but when this happens, they should turn to God for the answer. According to Vaughn, God always has the last say in things. It's not surprising that this is the advice that he gives, given the history of his marriage and his background. Just like how this movie begins, it ends with an emphasis on divine timing and power.